Mags on Media and some brand news from around the globe now. And Israel-based consumer home carbonation product company SodaStream teaming up with legendary crooner Rod Stewart to announce its pledge against single-use plastic products.
Before we face the cost, we can't keep.
Well, this is what one young ad agency executive says. As we approach the fourth decade of the so-called job bag, it's no surprise, he says, that the advertising industry is being disrupted. But here's the question. Are agencies doing enough to keep up? To find out, Keki Matlatlebe, strategy partner at the MNC Saatchi Able agency, attended something called Rise. I'm told it's the largest tech conference in Asia, features something like 760 startups and over 300 speakers and attendees from 100 countries. He is here, fresh off an aeroplane from Cape Town, to share some of his findings. Keke, a very warm welcome to you. For the uninitiated in advertising, let's set the context. When you talk about the age of the job bag, what are we talking about?
So the job bag is a tool that's been used for quite some time across different agencies. And that's to store a brief, a client brief, expectation in terms of the studio or in terms of strategy as well. And it's been around for quite some time. So the context of that is to say, well, if that's been around for so long, what are other processes in terms of agencies have been there as well? Going to Hong Kong and seeing just startups and other agencies thriving in terms of agility, I thought that was great. And it just seemed inherently that we really need to shift something.
In terms of thriving because of agility, what does that then say about the operating protocols as far as an ad agency is concerned? How do they need to change things?
At MNC Saatchi Able, we have a purpose, and it says we create beautifully simple solutions for an increasingly complex world. And what that involves is having an extreme distaste for complexity, stripping away everything that isn't necessary. And I think if I look at groups like a WPP, which are really multinational, complex organizations with a lot of layers, I think that is the hindrance behind this quest for agility, which I think that we're very much lacking.
And that's what young, successful startups are doing, is that they're stripping away the complexity and trying to simplify things. All well and good. How do you do it?
There's a few things that you can do. Cross-sector collaboration is one of the key things I found at Rise. I think it's about getting the right people in the room and doing it as quick as possible and having different points of view, insightful points of view, all solving one problem.
But collaboration is not just confined to the advertising industry, isn't it? I mean, this is a worldwide trend in terms of young economies.
Of course, definitely. And yeah, I think collaboration just leads to more interesting solutions, ultimately.
So how do you facilitate good collaboration then? Because often, and you will agree with me, there are competing interests. Do you need a sergeant major who is cracking the whip, or is it simply about changing culture and ethos within the supply chain?
I think the culture definitely has a core role to play in that. I think it's also about curating. So it's about getting those different people in the room from different walks of life, and it's also to a relevant problem. So I quite like the idea of the contrast between a fashionista or a business analyst working together to solve an issue around online retail. I think there's something quite interesting in that. We believe in this idea of building brands that move at the speed of culture. So again, it goes back to agility at the end of the day. It's about constantly moving and evolving. Like, for example, a David Bowie, or in my context, a Young Thug. These guys are kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of gender, in terms of sexuality, all the things that David Bowie was famous for, and Young Thug, who's currently famous for now.
And thanks for raising David Bowie, because you're now talking, Keke, about my generation, which I'm very, very grateful. But it's interesting to see how someone like that has transcended time. You talk about tapping into the speed of culture. I think that was the phrase that you used. How do you keep up with culture, which is moving so quickly, particularly as technology aids and abets it?
I was actually at a presentation a few weeks ago, and they said that people scroll through over 100 meters of content per day. 100 meters.
Say that again, 100 meters of content you and I are plowing through every day, probably because we're in the information business. It's more than that. That's frightening.
It's scary, and there's a lot, and it's very difficult to keep up. But I think certain brands who are true to their core, so if I look at a Nando's, for example, who is very much the voice of the people, and I think it's a part of the brand DNA, and that's what the brand is there to do. They tackle and shine a light on complex issues that we face as a country in South Africa, and I think it's about sticking true to who you are, and it's about finding those moments in culture where you can play a meaningful role as opposed to trying to take advantage of everything out there, because it's impossible.
So bring it back home as a final question. You also say that as brands are being shaped at, as you suggest, the speed of culture, the next disruptors of ad agency should be ourselves. We need, you say, to relook, rework and rethink our own processes internally. So how does the philosophy within a brand and an agency need to change? How do you start that deep inner reflection that you're referring to?
So I think it's about taking an objective eye and looking at where the areas that we're lagging. I think it's very easy to get sucked into the bubble that is technology and I guess glean towards all these exciting pieces of tech, AI, machine learning, blockchain. But I think they have to solve a problem at the end of the day. So for example, traffic manager, probably the most annoying part of their day is scheduling people's diaries, right? No one's available, have to go upstairs to go find people. So what if we used AI and voice to liberate them to not have to do that job and automate that process? It's quite a manual process right now. Let's automate that process and make it far easier for someone to rather focus on the bigger, meatier tasks like planning resource for the next 6 months as to how you're going to tackle the hot briefs that have come in from client.
How then does the job of a strategist change?
So that's really interesting because there's a lot of articles saying that, a strategist's job is redundant, it's all about creative. And I think that a strategist's core role is to be the voice of clarity in the room and to join the dots. As there are more and more of these dots, I think it's about who can simplify it and really tell one clean story for a creative, for a client, being a very valuable business partner to a client, but also to the agency as well. I think that's what it's about.
I think in the past 5 or 6 minutes you have just single-handedly killed the job bag. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers, thank you.
And coming up on the programme, the important link between music and advertising. And we'll also find out what happens when Santa's naughty list is leaked.